Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Play your game. I'm Tom Hannifan, flying solo to react to the news that broke today that Penn State football has finally found a new head coach. Penn State has hired Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell after a very long, arduous, complicated, frustrating, disappointing, and image-damaging search. This is difficult to unpack, and I don't have all of the details and information that are going to come out over the next handful of days in terms of a lot of the specifics, but we do have some information, obviously, that is very exciting, I think, for Penn State football fans. I know it doesn't feel exciting, obviously. This feels like you finally pick somebody at 2 a.m. on the dance floor, that sort of situation. The cold hard truth about this situation is that on paper, this is an excellent hire. Matt Campbell has done a lot with a little at Iowa State for many years, a football program that was consistently one of the worst in its conference. Matt Campbell was able to make Iowa State into a conference championship contender and was able to do a lot from Ames, Iowa, with very little NIL support. The encouraging thing that has come out, at least in the span of the time since this was announced and the deal was announced to be on its way towards being finalized, is that sources indicate to Matt Fortuna that Penn State is committing roughly $30 million in NIL money and $17 million in staff pool, assistant coaches, support staff to Matt Campbell. So if that $30 million in NIL is per annum annually, great. That is a situation where Penn State would actually be able to compete with some of the biggest schools in the country. So that would be a really interesting piece in this entire situation. But there's been a lot of little details that have continued to come out about this entire search that just makes this very complicated. There's one quote that discusses the search itself, and it said, as it turns out, Penn State had put out feelers Campbell's way at the start of this search months ago. Bad information about how best to reach Campbell led to those inquiries landing in the wrong place, apparently. And the school's interest ended up never even making it to Campbell himself. So literally, Penn State struggled to get in contact with the right Matt Campbell. If there is anything that explains how complicated and how weird this entire situation has been, it is that this hire happens the day after audio is leaked from an alleged meeting between Penn State athletic director Pat Kraft and Penn State football players, where I think maybe the intention was to show Pat Kraft in a negative light and show the players in a good light. We took away a lot from what Pat Kraft had to say in that audio, and you take it for what it's worth. And there's a long clip out there for anybody that wants to find it. And you can take away a lot of things in that. Pat Kraft obviously wants Penn State to compete at the highest level, to compete for national championships. And I really could care less about what Nick Saban had to say on this subject of saying, well, not everybody can do that, and you can't set that expectation, you can't set that goal. Yeah, I understand there can be unrealistic expectations for certain programs and, trying to be delusional. But I very much believe that if you're playing sports, your goal is to win everything. Your goal is to be the last team with a victory at the end of the season. So otherwise, why do you play the sport? So I throw out Nick Saban's notion, but it just really felt like this entire situation with Pat Kraft. I've heard from different sources and resources that it's basically, Matt Rule was somebody who was ruled out early and then immediately trying to pursue Curt Cignetti, he gets an extension. Trying to pursue Mike Elko, he gets an extension. We all heard the story about Kalani Sitake and how the folks at BYU and Crumble Cookies forked over a lot of money to keep him. And good for Kalani Sitake. He's a good coach, and that fits there. Matt Campbell, I think, is going to be a good fit for Penn State. I have no idea if it's going to work out to the degree of which will Penn State win a national championship under Matt Campbell. The Pat Kraft element of this entire situation is strange in that leaked audio, he was very honest in saying that if I don't get this right, if I don't get this hire right, my career is over. And he's absolutely correct, because in the span of roughly 2 months, his decision to fire James Franklin and not having a clear plan after the fact basically turned one of the most profitable, recognizable blue blood college football programs upside down, and is now the laughing stock of college football. And I've heard plenty of people say, okay, Penn State survived worse. You understand that. This is very different than obviously what happened in 2011. But this is just a black eye at this point on the program. And there's a lot of elements of this that are at fault. And from that leaked audio that we heard from the players, questions about, well, why we know Kobe Howard can play, for instance, and Tyser Denmark. Why aren't these guys playing? And those are things you can point back to James Franklin. And the thing that drives me nuts about this entire situation is that it's this amorphous blob with a million different tentacles. So you can't just sit here and say, this is all Pat Kraft's fault. This is all James Franklin's fault. This is all the administration's fault. There is systemic failure, unfortunately, when it comes to the management and guidance of Penn State football, whether it's in the Penn State athletic department or just Penn State University as a whole. And it's extremely disappointing. You can look at what James Franklin was doing and saying that his NIL model was not sustainable and was also not an NIL model that was built towards growth and constantly getting a team towards potentially having recruiting classes that were in the top 5, top 10 every single year. James Franklin would peak every 4 years. So he was playing money ball for a while, and he was trying to get people to take a discount to come play for him. He was also getting people to play for him and not the brand. I think that is a major flaw that needs to be repaired. It's also come out that Terry Smith will be staying with Penn State football, signed a 4-year contract. At the time I'm recording this, I don't know all the details of what his role will be, if it is what he was doing before as associate head coach. Terry Smith, for those that don't know, has been an integral recruiter for Penn State football for many, many years. Many of the names that you have come to know, regardless of which side of the ball, have been because of Terry Smith. His fingerprints are all over these rosters for many years. So the ability to sell the brand once again, I think, is going to be very, very important. And Terry Smith is a part of that, even though he did have interest from programs like UConn and Memphis, according to reports, to be a head coach. Terry Smith has every ability, clearly, to be a head coach. And I think the players are going to be glad that he's retained, because I've said it for a while, keeping Terry Smith stabilizes the program. I was definitely one of the people that wanted to see Terry Smith get the full-time job, but this is a decision that's been made. So you have Matt Campbell now installed as the head coach. Where can this potentially go? That is the enormous challenge of this, is that all of the candidates where you had a pretty good feeling of what the net return was going to be, like a Kurt Signetti, granted 2 years now in major college football in Indiana, it's done pretty damn well. So you have an expectation, but he's not won a conference championship yet, obviously. Indiana will be playing Ohio State this weekend for the Big Ten championship, and keep an eye on that situation, but has never won a national championship. So we're having to just see how this all plays out at this point. For the record, at this point in time, Ohio State, I believe, is favored by 4.5, according to our friends at FanDuel, for anybody that's interested in that. This is so you looked at Signetti, you looked at Elko. Elko at least felt like somebody okay on the rise, working with a major program. Urban Meyer was at least somebody who had been there, done that, but I think it's pretty well proven Urban Meyer is not really a good person, and did not have what it took for Penn State to feel confident in him to handle the NIL portion of this, because he has no experience in it. His experience in college football comes before the NIL era. So a lot of these names, and I could go on and on. Kalani Sitake is another guy who it falls in that Matt Campbell category for me of this is a good football coach. This is a really solid hire. And I think this is the thing that's unfortunately lost with bringing in Matt Campbell of the way that he was able to build tough, gritty teams that play with a lot of pride and a lot of passion. I think that's going to fit Penn State. You've heard a lot of people that are smart football people that for a while have been saying Penn State should just go grab Matt Campbell. And it took long enough. It took way too long. The challenge with this, and as I was saying before, is this going to work with Matt Campbell?
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
We have no idea of knowing because will it work depends on what your individual definition is it working out. If your definition of it working out is Penn State wins a national championship, I have no ability to answer that question. I just don't know. I really don't know. And honestly, even if Penn State had gone and hired any of those names I just mentioned, would there be a greater likelihood or certainty that Penn State would maybe get to that position? Sure, incrementally, though. Like all of this is the challenge that Penn State knew it was getting into when it fired James Franklin is that if you have the frustration of living around 9, 10, 11 wins and you're trying to get over the hump to a conference championship or to a national championship, that degree of percentage increase in success is far more difficult than anything that James Franklin was able to accomplish in 12 years. I'm not trying to belittle what he accomplished in 12 years, but going from, as he said, good to great to elite is extremely difficult. Good to great is one thing. Going from great to elite, which Penn State never did under James Franklin, had some great teams, but never elite teams. That is the most difficult thing to do in the sport. So that is now the task for Matt Campbell. I'm very curious to see what Penn State does here in the transfer portal because you are going to lose a sizable nucleus of this team to the National Football League, which we've talked about before here on State of State, is that Penn State has a lot of its core going off to the National Football League. And that was expected coming into this season. Penn State knew in 2026 there's going to be a drop-off in talent. Then you have the exodus because of James Franklin, whether it be staff, commits, existing roster members, have to deal with that. Will there be members of the Iowa State program that come to join Matt Campbell? I think there's a possibility of that, certainly. We'd have to see how that shakes out, eligibility, all that sort of stuff. But from everything I know about Matt Campbell and having watched his teams over the years, I think this is going to be a fit for Penn State. I think what is certainly going to bother Penn State football fans is one, right now, it's just, as I mentioned, this team feels like the laughingstock of college football. And Matt Campbell, I said when this all began, I personally didn't want Matt Campbell because the qualifiers that Pat Kraft put out there was somebody who would ignite the fan base. I never felt like Matt Campbell was going to ignite this fan base. And maybe he wins over Penn State and he wins the press conference, as people like to say. I think he'll be able to win games. I think he'll be able to right the ship. He is, as I've mentioned, he's done a lot with a little. So if he's getting $30 million in NIL, now if that's once, not great. You're going to get $300 million over time with this Adidas deal. So he's going to be walking into a situation that will be fruitful. One of the bigger things I think that eventually has to be addressed, but I don't even know if it's possible to really fix it, is how broken Penn State's administration, board of trustees, those that really have influence over Penn State's athletic department and football team specifically, because there is a lack of alignment and unity. And James Franklin constantly talked about that alignment of Dr. Neely Bendapudi to Pat Kraft to James Franklin. Yes, there was alignment amongst those three, but you have all of these outside actors and internal actors that are a tremendous problem for Penn State football and its future. LeVar Arrington, I respect him immensely, has spoken out and named Jay Paterno and Anthony Lebrano. There might be plenty of you that hear the name Paterno and believe that one is infallible. I promise you that is not the case when it comes to Jay Paterno. Consistently, what I have heard for many years, Jay Paterno, Anthony Lebrano, and now board member Matt McGloin, so many other names of that ilk, are anchors. And I don't mean that in a good way. People who hold this program back, hold this athletic department back in the dawn of football, in the ages of success with honor, which Penn State is still capable of, but you have to adapt to the modern era. And you have plenty of people within the Penn State community that want to move this thing forward and make evaluations not based on what James Franklin was doing, that were discounted players, loyalty, good qualities. You can't fault loyalty. Sometimes loyalty comes to a fault. But at what point do you start making evaluations based on best player plays? And we're going to go get the best players because we want to win and we want to be the best. And what does it take to get to that point? And I don't know if up until this point, Penn State has truly, truly been willing to do whatever it takes to win. I'm not saying cheating, bending the rules, turning into a program like Georgia, where you have a 41% graduation rate and players are getting arrested all the time. But there is a way for Penn State to have success with honor in this modern age. And I do believe Matt Campbell is somebody who can get Penn State there. The support of Terry Smith, I think, is going to be crucial to him getting there. The path now is very uncertain. I do not have high expectations for what 2026 is going to be because I think the roster turnover is going to be significant. You have seen people say there is a potential connection from the past between quarterback Ethan Grunkemeyer and Matt Campbell, as at one point Grunkemeyer was being recruited by Campbell and Iowa State. So hopefully that is a reason for Ethan Grunkemeyer to stay, but you never know in this situation. And we only have really just gotten to know what Ethan Grunkemeyer, the player, is truly like. So long story short, this is just the beginning of this. To the point about Pat Kraft saying, if this doesn't work out, my career is over. I think there's a lot of people out there calling for Pat Kraft to be fired. I don't think that's going to happen. Granted, I don't think a lot of this is going to happen, so I might be completely wrong tomorrow. I mean, we'll see what happens. But I believe they will give Pat Kraft time to support Matt Campbell, support this hire, because this has been such a disaster for the last 2 months. If you fire him now that the hire's been made, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. You now have to give Campbell and Kraft a runway to figure this thing out. So there's that element. I don't really know who or how quickly people within the Penn State community, administration, board of trustees, football, athletics, whatever, come together and get aligned and get unified, because there are so many people pulling this program in a lot of different directions. And it's just understanding what is it going to take to get us there. So best of luck to Matt Campbell. You have inherited a mess, an absolute mess. And here's the thing. I still look back on this situation with James Franklin being fired, and Penn State's getting roasted in the media. And it's fascinating how so many media members were calling for James Franklin to get fired for a long time, or Penn State to move on from him because Penn State was hitting a ceiling. And then Penn State makes a decision, and it was like, it's the worst decision ever. How could you do that? That's so stupid. He was winning all these games. Penn State still, in my opinion, made the right decision moving on from James Franklin. You had reached the ceiling, and I think it's very clear now he was operating under an NIL model that was never going to get Penn State to a national championship. And his old school loyalty to seniors and his robotic, vapid nature, I think, was the incorrect fit for Penn State football long term. I don't know if Matt Campbell is the right fit for Penn State long term, but I think there's a lot of elements about what he brings to the table and his ability to do more with less that Penn State is going to need, because you are going to deal with a situation where less talented players are going to be available to Penn State. Top end players are probably not going to want to walk into this dumpster fire right now. So he's going to have to work extremely hard to win back that faith and convince high caliber players to want to come to Penn State. I'm ecstatic that Terry Smith is staying on. And obviously I'm biased when it comes to that, doing this show consistently, regularly with Justin King. His stepfather is Terry Smith, and Justin has been doing a tremendous job trying to support Terry throughout this entire process. So I can only imagine the emotional roller coaster that this has been for Terry Smith and his family. So I'm glad that there's some security there and that this has been stabilized, but nothing has really truly been stabilized. So we will continue to monitor this situation here. And don't forget, Big Ten championship game this weekend, not to mention Selection Sunday, and we'll see what bowl game Penn State is going to be invited to. Does Penn State accept that invitation? Does Penn State play in a bowl game? If they do, what is that game? Where is that game? All that sort of stuff. We will explore all of that right here on State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.